Zoe, do you want me to start the webinar or can you do it? Never mind. Hi, good evening. I'm gonna do a quick troubleshooting with someone who's having trouble getting into the meeting, one of the members, and then I'll be right back to get started. All right. Hi. Welcome. Welcome to our second meeting. Laura, you're here. I just emailed you how to get in. Welcome. Okay, well, we're going to open with a land acknowledgement. Christine was going to open, and I don't see Christine yet. Let me just check and see. Let me just send a quick. I'm gonna do it. Okay, so I'm going to open with a land acknowledgement tonight. So I'd like to take a moment today and acknowledge that we're meeting today on the land that has been inhabited by the Salish, Kootenai, and Ponderay people for hundreds of years. Before colonists imposed the laws and norms that we live with today, Indigenous peoples took care of this land, were housed on this land, and lived on it for generations, nurturing families along with other social and economic systems. A little over 100 years ago, Indigenous people were forcibly removed from the Missoula Valley to live on what is now referred to as the Flathead Reservation. We acknowledge this history of the Missoula Valley and the injustices perpetuated here. This acknowledgement carries with it intent. May we stay grounded in our intention to remain connected to history as we push ourselves to imagine, create, and uphold a more equitable housing future for all citizens of Missoula County. And I just want to acknowledge too that that's Christine Littig's acknowledgement that she shared with me. And I appreciate her sharing those words with me. And I'm using her words without her permission, but she shared them with me in advance of the meeting. So I'm going to thank her and hope that she's okay with that. And then we will call our July meeting of the Affordable Housing Resident Oversight Committee to order. And then we'll take roll call. Zoe, do you want to do that?
Yep. So Paul Herendeen, Riley Jacobson, and Misty Brown all have excused absences tonight. And so I'll go through the list here with who's remaining. So we have John Engen.
Here.
Lori Davidson.
Sorry, here.
Okay, thank you. Heidi West.
Here.
Laura Bird. Don't see Laura. Katie Carlson. Don't see Katie. Will Seaburn.
Here.
Jerry Stiffarm.
I'm here.
Thank you. And Bobby Jo Weston.
I'm here.
Okay. Thank you. That's everyone.
Emily, this is Christine, and I apologize. I was having trouble getting into the meeting this evening. But I just wanted to let you know I was here. And
welcome. Welcome. I just emailed you.
Thank you.
I apologize. I hope it's okay. I read your land acknowledgement.
It's great.
Okay.
And not my usual to be late, so I
No,
was
understand.
Okay, thank you.
And I acknowledge that they were your words, and I was reading them without your permission, but I hope that was okay.
No, I love that, and thank you. I just wanted to let you know I was here.
Thank you. Okay. So we're going to do things a little out of order tonight and approve our minutes if you adopt your bylaws from your June minutes. So we're going to skip over that for now. And I'm going to share my screen too. So just one second. I'm feeling a little discombobulated. So thanks for hanging with me. Okay, let me share this. You can see my PDF. Great. Okay, so we're gonna just start for the next few meetings with introductions because we have some absences and we'll have opportunities for each other to meet for the first time with people jumping in and out of meetings. And so as attendance shifts, there will be times when maybe you haven't met someone. So I know that this may feel familiar from last time, but if you would please share, I know you just said roll call too, but if you would please share your name and how you'd like to be addressed in the committee, your role, title, whatever you'd like to be referred to as, your pronouns, and then your role on the committee, we'll go through that. So I'll call on someone and then you can pass it to someone else too, and that's how we'll use it. So I'm Emily Harris Shears. I like to be called Emily, and I use she, her pronouns, and I am the staff of this committee, and I'm the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Administrator with the City of Missoula. And I'll pass it to Jerry.
Okay, sorry, I have a cold, so I haven't been feeling the best the last 2 weeks. My name is Jerry, and I prefer to be called Jerry. I use she and her pronouns, and I am a committee member selected by the mayor for the community. Sorry.
Will, do you want to go next?
Sure. Will Severn, he, him, his pronouns. Call me Will is fine. And I am a community member on the committee. And I'll pop it over to Lori.
Thanks, Will. Lori Davidson. I am called Lori. She, her pronouns, and I'm the executive director of the Missoula Housing Authority. That's my role on the committee. And I'll pass it over to Christine.
Hey, Lori, thanks. Christine Littig. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Again, thank you to the entire committee for your patience this evening as I tried to jump on. My role on the committee is that I sit in a 3-year term from the county commissioners, and I go by Christine. And I will pass it on, and my view is still singular, so let me say I'll pass it on to Will.
I already went, so maybe I'll give it to Heidi, but all good.
So Bobby Joe.
Hi, my name is Bobby. I go by Bobby. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a committee member and the second alternate on the committee.
Heidi, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Heidi West. I'm the city council, I guess, appointee, or the person representing city council on this committee, and my pronouns are she, her, and I just go by Heidi. Thanks. And I think, am I the last person?
I think Mayor Engen needs to go.
Oh, well, we all know who John is, but John, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Heidi. I'm John Engen, Mayor of the City of Missoula. I am a he and a him, and please call me John. And Jerry, I'm sorry about your cold. Summer colds are the worst.
Great, thank you. Thanks for introducing yourselves. I hope that will help us just remember each other, and I know it's hard in our squares, so I hope this will help us get to know each other. So thanks. And if you would like to do icebreaker questions, I'm particularly partial to them, but I know people aren't always. So if you are partial to them, you can send me an email and tell me, and I will put them in the plan. I really like them, and my team does them a lot because of that. So you can let me know. But I was going to save you tonight because there's other norming stuff that you're doing later. I also just wanted to have a chance for you all to review your norms, and you built on your norms last meeting. So just an opportunity to review those and feel if those still resonate with you. So the norms that you all committed to last month, of respecting differing perspectives, accepting loose ends, that we won't figure out how to tie everything up in every meeting or even every several meetings. stepping up and stepping back. So if you're someone who is more likely to engage in the conversation, taking a step back. If you're someone who maybe is more of a listener in a space, maybe pushing yourself to step up and speak up, pushing ourselves as a committee to kind of take risks, or yourselves rather to take risks, being and staying present in the space, respecting privacy of others. And that really refers to when we're telling stories or experiences or anecdotes about community members. If you're unsure about something, just ask, and really embracing that culture of not knowing, and it's okay to not know, but a learning culture, taking action where we can, using the strengths-based perspective, accepting the pace of the work and not being too hard on yourselves, I guess. I can include myself in that. Celebrating successes, checking in on the norms and and is there comfort in operating them, spelling out acronyms, and trying to sort of and bring everyone into that learning space, and then using the raise your hand feature while we're still on Zoom so that we can sort of queue up people so that everyone has a chance to share and have a voice in the space. So do those still feel like something you can commit to, and is anything missing? See a thumbs up. Great. Thanks. Okay. So we're out of order. Oh no, we're not. I'm gonna take off my screen share for a minute. So I wanted to, Zoe, do you want to do the public comment?
Yep, I'll do that. Okay, so this meeting is a Zoom webinar, and you can participate by calling in from a landline or cell phone using one of the phone numbers from our agenda. And once you're in the meeting, you can press *9 to raise your hand and be recognized for public comment. And then you will use *6 to mute and unmute. If you're joining the meeting from a computer, you can use the raise and lower hand function to be recognized as well. Alternative ways to participate and comment are through mail, email, and voicemail. And those phone numbers and addresses are, you can find them in the participation guide on the city website. And that is also displayed on the screen right now. It looks like we have, let me take this down and see who we have. Okay, only one attendee, and I don't see any hands up, so nothing at the moment.
Great, thanks, Zoe. Also, hi, Laura, welcome.
I was having computer issues. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. Welcome.
Perfect. Thank you.
We just did introductions, but since this is your first meeting, I wanted to offer, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Laura Bird. I'm a community member. I'm also the eligibility specialist for All Nations Health Center. I've lived in the Missoula community since 1999, and happy to be here. Thanks.
Great, thanks. And we're ahead of schedule, so I'm going to ask if all of our committee members will introduce themselves too, just since this is your first meeting and I want you to feel welcome to know everyone. So Will, do you want to start? Just do a quick intro.
Sure. Yep, Will Seaburn, he, him pronouns, also a community member, designee on the committee. Kick it to Mayor Engen.
Thanks, Will. Hi, Laura. I'm John Engen, Mayor of the City of Missoula. I'm a he and a him, and please call me John.
Heidi.
Hi, I'm Heidi West. I'm on the city council and she, her. I go by Heidi. Thanks.
Lori.
Hi, Laura. I'm Lori Davidson. I'm the executive director of the Missoula Housing Authority. I use she, her pronouns, and happy to see you here. Thanks for coming.
Thanks. Christine.
Hey, Laura, welcome. I'm Christine Littig, and I am on a 3-year term with the County Commissioners, and I go by she, her pronouns. Welcome.
Jerry.
Oh,
Oh, cool. Thanks, Christine.
I think Jerry might have stepped away momentarily.
Okay. Bobby, do you want to go next?
Yeah, my name is Bobby. I go by Bobby. I'm she, her, and I am a community member and second alternate.
Cool. Thanks. And Laura, you know me, and I'm Emily, and there's Jerry's also here, but it looks like she may have stepped away for a minute. And there are other committee members who are not here tonight, so you'll have other opportunities to meet in future meetings. But glad you're here. Thanks. And thanks for doing a second round of introductions. I appreciate it. Okay, so I wanted to have a chance to talk a little bit about kind of our space around our committee and equity building tonight. So at last month's meeting, I posed the question of whether the committee would like to develop a charter to reflect your values and to kind of complement your bylaws. And I teased it a few times and then we ran out of time. And so I, looking back and reading your minutes and all those things, and thinking about your conversation and discussion around commitment to equity and your norms and other things, I took some of your discussions from your first meeting and put them into a template of what your charter might look like. And I don't want you to feel obligated or pressured to develop or adopt a charter, but I just thought it might be a helpful tool for you to help visualize and think about how you might start to operationalize some of your values and action steps around things like equity and where you might put those tools so that you have something concrete if that's valuable to you. And I also want to just name that curiosity I have for me about how we'll partner in my work around my day-to-day work as the trust fund administrator, especially around work around equity, and how we will partner as colleagues as the trust fund administrator and the oversight committee and our work in alignment around equity could be in aligning our work in your charter and my work. I don't know if that doesn't resonate with you, we can talk about other things. But I just wanted to offer one solution. So I'm going to share the template with you that I know was also in your packet. But I wanted to at least just start a conversation, ask if this resonates with you. Is it a tool that you would find useful? And then we'll start there. How does that sound? I'm pulling it up now. 1 second. Okay, you should be able to see it. So I just pulled in some information from your bylaws and also just some general charter information. I think the spaces that I wanted to highlight for you that if this is a tool that you would be interested in, that you would need to work together to develop or around your vision for the oversight committee. And then also I think there's opportunity to build your guiding principles. I pulled these from I adapted them, but pulled them from the housing policy, but I think there's room to develop them further. And then I pulled your equity principles from your discussion around what your commitment to equity looks like. And I summarized your conversation. So I just wanted to highlight that. And then I also pulled your membership roles and responsibilities from your discussion around the bylaws and your norms discussion. So So let's start with my first question of what do you think about a tool like a charter? Does this seem like something that would be useful to you, to your committee as a tool? Does this resonate with you? Christine?
I'll communicate that upon first reading it, it did resonate with me. And I wondered why you had left the vision blank. I think it would be valuable for this group as a new entity to do some work around vision. So I was excited to see that you had left that blank, but also wondered, and you just confirmed why. And I also think it while we may not end up differentiating ourselves from the housing policy, it might be worthwhile to explore our own guiding principles, not just to explore those principles, but also as an exercise to help us get to know each other.
That's helpful. Thanks, Christine. I'm also just going to say that today's work is not to develop the vision or any of the, today my goal is for you really to dig into your bylaws and the housing policy work. But if this is something you want to work on, I'll probably punt this to August. Really, it was just like, hey, I made you a template. What do you think? Do you not even want it? I'll toss it out if you don't want it. So I just want to name that. Yeah, the vision piece I left blank because I'm really trying to hold a balance of not doing all of your work for you. Not because I don't want to, but because I want to give ownership to this committee. And I've been in a space for the last 9 months of doing the work of the trust fund, and I want to share that work with you all, and I don't want to take your work. So that's why I left it blank. And Will, do you have something?
Yeah, I just had a question kind of, I think this all looks good, but just trying to understand like why we would want a charter. Because I think we've got the bylaws that kind of explain how the committees to operate. And then we have the like administrative policies that then reference all of the housing plans and everything that go into that. And so like I feel, and like I think you even mentioned like a lot of the stuff is pulled from the bylaws themselves. So I'm just wondering, maybe I just don't understand. I probably don't understand like the value of a charter, but it does seem like outside of maybe some of the norms that are at the bottom, where it's like kind of what's the roles and responsibilities and things like that. I just am curious kind of what value do we get out of having a charter? And maybe another question is like, is this something every like resident committee does, and it is a helpful tool? Like, is it something foundational you just want to do when you're starting a committee?
John, go ahead.
Thanks, Emily. So just a little bit of background with regard to group charters. We've been using them pretty regularly at the administrative level at the city, largely around functional work teams, just to create some focus and to memorialize some goals. I think as an exercise, if folks want to engage in this, I don't see any reason not to. But I also think that that the committee's work is largely prescribed. in a variety of other documents and memorialized in municipal law. So the charter itself is sort of it's a bit more of a formal. I think in this case, it would be a bit more of a formal way of having the committee restate or in some cases provide some additional detail to some of the prescriptions already in place. I will tell you that I don't think any of our volunteer committees have a charter in place, in no small part because a lot of them have been around forever. I think it's entirely up to you all whether you want to engage in the process. And I'm trying to be what I don't want to be is I don't want to be a domineering expert in all of this. It's just that I've been around the block a few times. So I will pipe in when I know something based on experience, but I don't want you to construe any of that as me trying to tell you all what to do. I think you ought to guide yourselves and do what you're comfortable with. So when I pipe up, it's largely a function of giving you some background and not trying to be bossy pants.
I think some spaces, if I can offer, that are not covered in ordinance or in the bylaws that that I think could be worthwhile in exploring and may not live in a charter but could be somewhere else, are really your principles around equity and what your framework looks like for that. And it may not be this document, but I think that commitment piece, where does it live beyond a conversation? And I think that feels important to me. And I think it feels important to the work we do. I know in the conversations I've had, it feels like it sounds important to the community as well. And I think that could be something to think about as well. It could be a framework that you develop rather than a charter around specifically equity or something else. But I just wanted to name that that's something I've heard that so could be something else, but just wanted to name that. And I was taking kind of a start at that, but it doesn't have to necessarily be this too. Lori? And then Bobby.
Yeah, I don't mind the idea of having a charter. I like that it really brings everything together in one place. I especially like that it actually lists the members and their terms and that can be updated. I think that's not anywhere else. Well, I mean, probably on the website or city's website or other places like that, but I don't think those members are specified in any of the other formation documents that we're working on. So I like that part of it. I do like having the equity principles as part of the charter. I think having it all in one document is really helpful. So you don't have to go from one document to another to bring it all together. This is just kind of a summary of everything, our purpose, the scope of what we're doing. I like it.
Bobby?
And I want to thank Will for asking the question because I was wondering myself what the difference was between this and the bylaws and all that, since we do have so much already written down that we have been through, and it was really a question that I was thinking and didn't know how to phrase. So thank you, Will. But I would like to say for me, I feel like we have so much work ahead of us and so little time to do it, that dedicating a large portion of time to this feels to me like it is time that would be spent better elsewhere. And so as much as I like the idea of having all this information in one place, there are other places for us to find most of it. And I think that we really, as a committee, should prioritize our time.
Christine, is that a new hand?
It is a new hand.
Okay.
I wanted to say that I acknowledge what Bobby's saying, and I couldn't agree more. I feel like we have a lot of work going forward, but there's also something I like about a charter as almost like a cliff notes. And I think that's a little bit of what Lori was talking about, is one document that we can go to that has content and intention and focus. And so I would just like to reiterate that. And how much time we spend on that, I think we could revisit or continue to push ourselves and know that we have other charges that are extremely important. But I do like this Cliff Notes version of our roles and responsibilities, and something that I feel like I can tap into quickly. And it has content, and like Lori was saying, participants, and reminds me quickly each time I come to this meeting what our intention is.
Lori?
And I'd just add that this is such a great start on this document. May not take a whole lot of time for us to get through this, as we, maybe revisit it when more members are here next month. But I'm not sure what I would add to this at this point. I mean, we can argue about a word here or two, a word now and then, or maybe a phrase. But I think this is such a good start that, at least to begin with, I don't think it's going to take a lot of time to kind of get through this. That's just my personal feeling. I think it's brought together all the main points that we've talked about already, and the things that are in the bylaws and, as the mayor said, in the regulations.
Well, thanks, Lori.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with Lori and Emily. Thank you for all the work you put into putting this draft together. I think it's totally fine. Like, it's like, I think Mayor Engen said, there's probably no downside in having this. My only perspective would be, I feel like anything that we would put in the charter, why would that not be in the admin policies? Like, if there are some core, like, maybe, I'm not saying like all the roles and responsibilities of community members, but things about equity and things like that, I feel like it seems a little odd that would be in the charter, but not in the admin policies, in terms of like how, like, what's our focus? What do we want to be prioritizing? But that said, I think it's, I think Lori makes a good point. There's probably not a ton of time that needs to be invested into this. I think my only point is, I just feel like our job is to approve the admin policies and the annual allocation plan. I feel like our values should be expressed through those documents that actually carry, like actual weight on how funding decisions get made and things like that.
Heidi?
I just wanted to echo Will's comment just now, and I was wondering if we could maybe, instead of having a separate charter, have a preamble to the admin manual that really spells out what our values are, and that way maybe it's a little bit easier to navigate too, so we don't have so many like disparate places where things live, and that way we can really clearly define what the values are that are represented in the admin manual.
Heidi, will you talk through that a little bit more? I'm not sure I have a clear understanding of that.
Yeah, so for example, with the ground leases that I've worked with at the NMCDC, there's a preamble to the ground lease that is like all about the values, I guess, that are represented by the organization, but isn't really part of the legalities of the ground lease. but gives context for like why it's important and why, you know, everybody agrees to this, I guess, system of home ownership in that case, and is really about the values that are represented by it. Does that make sense? So I think it could be similar in this case. You know, this is this admin manual, but we're trying to attain or like achieve certain community values, and if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think there's some opportunity to review where the equity policy or the equity principles could also fit in the policies. But I also think there's some clarification too of the like role division of the admin policies and the trust fund oversight. And I think like the charter and the bylaws, like clearly to me, like provide guidance around your roles, and the admin policies are really how we administer the trust fund, which do link closely to your roles as well, but really also connect to how we partner with grantees and how we administer funds and all of those pieces. So I think they're all linked closely, but I think there's like, so I'm interested to explore this preamble piece. I want to do some reading. I want to look at an MCDC's piece, just to understand it a bit more. But I think there's definitely, Will, I hear you, and I think there's opportunity to link the equity pieces that we didn't have when I started writing the policy. But I also, I want to just clarify that I think the charter could also clarify for the community your role, when they're not going to necessarily sit down and read your whole bylaws too. So I think that could also be something that sort of supports that too. So I want to see that Lori's hand is up, and then I want to also honor our schedule, and then I want to do a proposal. So can we do that?
Yeah,
Lori?
I'll be
Okay.
brief.
Yeah, I want to hear what you have to say.
I just want to say that unless I'm looking at the wrong document, the policy document doesn't address the Resident Oversight Committee at all, as far as I can see. And I might have missed it or just not seen it, but that's why I think it might be important to have, you know, the bylaws and the charter for the Resident Oversight Committee, because it isn't really addressed in the policy, and it's actually not part of the policy. Or, I mean, it could be, we could add, I guess it could be added to the policy. And maybe that's what people are proposing. But right now, this is all about how, you know, how the trust funds are administered.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, there's a short section about that role, but you're right, Lori, it's a relatively short section.
Yeah, I can't even find it. Do you know exactly where it is?
I might know the page, but I can find it when we get to that part.
Oh, it's all right. It's not.
I'll impress you with my scrolling.
Yeah, I'll find it. I can find it on my own.
Okay.
I'm sure it's in here somewhere.
So many times, you know.
Yeah.
Mayor John, I'm trying to get used to that. Did you have anything? Did you have your hand up?
You know, I was just going to sort of quickly piggyback on Heidi's comment. This is a little bit in the weeds, but I think you know, when we get to the point where we're actually allocating funds, I think that allocation can come with a statement of values, and I think what we use in land use is a findings of fact, and that's sort of a method of not only restating those values, but also describing why an individual project, in the case of an affordable housing project, why it's in alignment with those values. And I think if we do that in each case as we give allocations, that I think that provides not only that record, but is sort of a perpetual reminder of why we're in the business and why the money is going where it's going. So that's another way to sort of ensure that those values are top of mind as we go about our business.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you. This is a really great discussion. I think we got a lot of great ideas and heard really helpful perspective on this. I'm going to make a proposal because we are missing many members tonight that I am going to do some additional follow-up on things like preamble, look into what the other options could be of where we might slot it in, and just look into what might be a better fit. Sounds like this may not be the right fit, that there may be other documents that might meet your needs more. And then I will also, you may have a chair and a co-chair by tonight or maybe next meeting that I may be able to work more closely with on developing this, and bring back something for you all to react to. So I'm going to propose that we keep moving forward with kind of a grounding document, but that it may not be a charter, it may be something else, but that we'll move forward, but that we'll keep kind of exploring what that looks like. How does that sound? We're not fully taking it off the table, but we're going to keep exploring whether this is the right tool. Okay, cool. And then we'll also look at, I will keep working on some of the improvements to the policies around that too. Okay. All right. So what's next? Gotta look at my agenda. Okay. All right. Stop this. So we're gonna move on to a really fast. Thanks for that discussion. That was really helpful. So we're gonna just quickly. I wanted to just prepare for reviewing the bylaws and potentially selecting your chair and co-chair tonight, and potentially adopting your bylaws, and go through a quick Robert's Rules overview. I know that this may be review or very familiar to some, and it may be brand new to others. So I wanted to offer this as a knowledge building opportunity. And I've been learning it as I've been new to the city and just observation through meetings. So I invite people to share their knowledge as well, and share your insights as we go. I will offer that it feels very formal as you start, and then I think it just becomes muscle memory as you go. And I think your committee will get a style, and just embrace that. So I just want to give a quick Robert's Rules overview so that you feel prepared. And, I would just embrace, like we in our norms, a spirit of learning and culture of learning as you go, that if you don't get it quite right, someone will offer to support you in it. So I know I sent this out in advance. I'm sure you had a chance to read or may have had a chance, but there's just, and I'll put these back up as we do it, but there's just some, if you want to adjourn or recess, there's things you specifically say. I'm not going to go through them all, but you can read them on the screen. So if you want to do something, there's a specific thing you would say. So for example, if you wanted to adjourn, you'd say, I move that we adjourn. And then there's like a little cheat sheet here about like, can you interrupt the speaker? No. Do you need a second? Yes. And like, can you debate this? Does it need to be debatable, or is it debatable? No. Amendable? No. And then how much of the vote do you need, or a majority? Does the chair decide? I find these charts really helpful. They're also in your shared cloud folder, in a document form. So just want to offer that. And then and another one, so there's a more of like conversational Robert's Rules. So if you're in a like if you need a point of order, so you need to like object to a procedure or a personal affront. See, this is what I mean about some of these very formal pieces. You would say point of order. You can interrupt the speaker for that. If you need to request information, you'd say point of information. And just these are just some examples. And then I went through what if you want to accomplish things in your meetings, this is what you really need to focus on for today, is if you want to make a motion, you want to propose a new idea or an action to the group, you would say to the chairperson that I move that, and then the motion. And we wrote out your motions tonight, just so that you have them as examples. And then if you want to amend a motion, so the motion that's on the table doesn't feel quite right, you would say, after the chairperson recognizes you, you would say, I move that the motion be amended by adding the following words. And then you would say the words. I move that we add this. I don't know. I'm not good on my feet. And the key thing here is that when you raise your hand, or if you're in person, you get the attention of the chairperson, you wait until the chairperson recognizes you or calls on you, and then you can speak. So that's just something that I wanted to name. And then there's some other things you can accomplish in meetings, like if you want to postpone, you want the membership to have more time to consider the question that's under discussion, and you want to postpone it to a definite time or day, and you have it to come up in further consideration, you'd tell the chair, you'd ask the chairperson after you've been recognized, I move to postpone the question until, and then you ask for the date. And then you'd proceed and everyone would vote on that. If you want to limit debate, you think that the discussion is getting long, but you want to give everyone a reasonable length of time to consider the question, you would ask the chairperson to move to limit the discussion to 2 minutes per speaker, for example. So those are just some examples of how you could still accomplish what you want in the meeting by using formal Roberts rules. And these are in your packet, so hopefully you can follow them if you need them. There's some examples. If you want to withdraw a motion, you've made a motion, and after discussion, you wish you hadn't made that motion. Sometimes I feel that way, that I wish I hadn't posed a question. You could ask for recognition and then ask the chairperson, I ask permission to withdraw my motion, take it off the table, essentially. And then if you want the meeting to end, you can ask the chairperson for recognition, and then chairperson, I move to adjourn. So just some things to consider of a motion. Members can debate the motion. Before speaking in debate, members obtain the floor or get recognition. The maker of the motion has the first right of the floor if they claim it properly. Debate must be confined to the merits of the motion, so you have to be talking about the topic at hand. And the debate can be closed only by the order of the assembly, so the vote, or if the chair, or by the chair if no one else is talking about it. So if there's no more discussion, then the chairperson can close it and move to a vote. And just some things to consider is just, typical general listening standards of listening to the other side, focus on the issue and not personalities, avoid questioning people's motives, and being civil, which I know will not be a challenge in this group. And then putting a motion to a vote. The chair asks, are you ready for the question? If no one rises to claim the floor, the chair proceeds to take the vote. And the chair will say, the question is the adoption of the motion that, and then the way that the motion is written. And as many are in favor, say aye and pause for a response. And then as opposed, say nay and pause for a response. And those abstained will say aye. And then the chair announces the result of the vote. and that's whether the motion carries or if the motion fails. And Zoe and I were discussing whether we would do a roll call vote in these or not. So we're not sure about that. And we'll look to either Heidi or John, who have more experience in this. So, because we're learning too. And then any questions about this really quick and not very knowledgeable Robert's Rules overview? I'm learning it as I go too. So it's really through observation and meetings. Okay. Anything you want to clarify, Heidi or John?
You know, I'll just say that that it can be a little intimidating at first, but you will get used to it pretty quickly. Don't be afraid to make a mistake, because there are no horrible consequences associated with not memorizing or deploying Robert's Rules of Order with perfection. Interestingly, City Council uses Mason's Rules of Order. So believe it or not, there are more than one set of rules of order.
Good to know.
Which is, yeah, and the Mason's manual is hundreds of pages, and there are all sorts of shenanigans you can get up to if you're an expert in parliamentary procedure. I'll tell you in my experience that parliamentary shenanigans usually don't go well. So we just use it. We just use these rules to really just provide a framework for getting through decision making, and getting through it in a way that's consistent and that other people can understand it. So yeah, it seems like a thing, but it's not that big a thing. With regard to whether you do a roll call vote or a voice vote, while we are in a virtual setting, I would recommend roll call because it's really hard to figure out voice votes simultaneously during a Zoom call. But in real life, it's pretty easy to tell when there is a lone nay and a bunch of ayes or the opposite. So yeah, I'd go with roll call until we're in a setting where we can see and hear each other.
Thank you. Thanks. That's really helpful. Okay, well, now we're on to our bylaws review. So thank you all for reviewing and sending edits. I really appreciate it. So Jim Nugent, the city attorney, reviewed and had a few edits, which I'll go over. I tracked them and I tracked changes for you, but I'll just review them for you. So he suggested that we define the Missoula area as within the city limits, city of Missoula, and within 5 mile radius of the city limits. And that's consistent with the health district limits of Rule 2. And so we added that. And then we removed the sentence, the Affordable Housing Resident Committee shall determine whether a conflict exists and determination shall be entered into the minutes of the meeting. And that's from section 5, terms of office number 1. And that was just, it felt redundant in the paragraph. And then we also added original appointing body to the first sentence in section 5, termination. And then I made a change and added land acknowledgement to Article 7, conduct of business, Section 1, order of business, which is essentially your agenda, as we are planning to have a land acknowledgement in every meeting. And we want our agenda to be consistent in your bylaws. So those are the only additional edits that have been made. I can show you the document if you'd like to see it, or again, open it up for questions or comments. Will?
Yeah, all the changes look totally fine to me. I just wanted to understand a little bit more on the conflict of interest one. I know you said it was redundant. I'm just curious then who does decide if it's a conflict of interest? If like when I first saw that, I thought, well, maybe that's because like someone else decides, like I don't know, city clerk or city attorney or something like that would determine if it's an actual conflict or if it's more like this is redundant because it's kind of like if you have a conflict, declare it, and if you declare it, don't participate in the vote.
Yeah, let me read it really quickly. Jim and I talked about this for a while, and we did have a discussion about this. So yeah, so that was good question, Will. So some of that was that we felt like it would be part of it is what Mayor Engen highlighted last meeting was that the conflict of interest rule is really clear. So if someone does raise a conflict of interest, it would be really me or the staff working with the city attorney or the clerk's office to determine if there is a conflict and then going back to that member to determine that. And so it doesn't need, that sentence didn't need to be in there because that felt more like process that we would do outside of the meeting. So that's why Jim said that we could remove that. It felt redundant.
Yeah, that makes total sense because yeah, there's if the policy is very clear outside of this committee, it seems like that should like we shouldn't get to have our own opinion about what a conflict of interest is. So great.
Yeah, and so that's why he said to remove it. And then Christine, did you have your hand up?
I did because the share is so small, but I pulled up the document and I'm good, Emily. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anything else in the edits? All right. When I toggle back and forth, can you see my new document? Like, can you see my PDF again? Cool. Okay. All right. Do you want to have any more discussion or are you ready to move to a motion? I don't know how to do this part.
I move to adopt the Missoula Affordable Housing Resident Oversight Committee bylaws as written.
I will second that motion. Hope I did that right.
Okay. So then Heidi, were you about to say something before we?
Well, I actually was wondering if we wanted to put it on hold, which is not in line with the motion right now.
Okay.
Just because we have so few of our members present and 3 of us are ex officio members, and that feels a little, I don't know, it feels like we could have more citizens present for this vote. But I really have no, I'm happy either way.
You are voting members. All 3 of you are voting members. So that is something to consider, but I think that is also something to consider that you could wait. And you could also wait to do your chairs until August meeting as well. And we could spend the remainder talking about policies. And I'm sure we could fill the time. And Will, you raised your hand and I think someone else raised their hand.
Yeah, that was just gonna, I think maybe Christine had her hand up too earlier, but that was just gonna be a question. I know our bylaws haven't been approved yet, but quorum is a simple majority of voting members, which I think we have.
Mm-hmm.
I hear you, Heidi, but I don't know, like if there, okay, is there any negative downside to delaying this one more month? I know, I guess it's one more month that we don't have bylaws, but My own perspective is I feel like we had a pretty good debate about the bylaws last meeting, and I feel like a lot of the feedback was taken into consideration. So I'm comfortable moving forward, but I'm also totally open to if other people feel strongly that we should wait one more month to make sure we have people here.
And for what it's worth, I didn't get any additional edits once I sent Jim's feedback. I didn't get any additional comments. Lori?
I say, let's just do it.
Okay.
Move on.
Okay. So the motion is on, so we'll go with a roll call vote. Zoe, are you able to pull that up?
Yep, sure can. All right, so
Thank you.
John Engen,
And forgive me, but am I not ex officio?
Ex officio members vote.
We do. Well, those, I should have read the bylaws, apparently. Yes, aye. Thank you.
Lori Davidson, Lori,
Yeah, oh, sorry. I missed that. I vote aye. Just so everyone knows, I'm an ex officio member as well.
thank you. Heidi West,
Aye.
Laura Bird,
Aye.
Will Seaburn,
Aye.
Jerry Steffarm, is Jerry still here? Let's see. Jerry, are you there?
I am here. Sorry, I couldn't get unmuted.
It's all right. Did you want to let us know how you are voting?
Yes, I am moving to adopt. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. And Christine Littig.
Aye.
All right, that's 7 yeses.
Okay. Congratulations, you adopted your bylaws. Thank you. Okay. So the next order of business was to discuss and select your chair and vice chair. And I pose it back to the group if you want to do that tonight, or if you want to wait until the next meeting based on attendance. So I'll just open that up to the group for discussion. And just a reminder that, you know, based on your bylaws, you need a chair and vice chair. And that until you have one, I'm your facilitator.
I wouldn't mind doing the selection tonight, unless you think we have too many absent.
Lori?
How many are not here? I know 3 for sure, but how many others? Are there others?
Yes, we're missing. I have to say their names because I don't know everyone yet. Sorry, it's not calling them out, but
No, there were at least maybe 4 were missing.
yeah, we're missing 4.
I think we might want to wait till next month, just because that's a lot.
Sure. I know Misty, when she told me she was going to miss tonight, she did tell me that she could not take on the role. So she did tell me that if she was nominated, that I was to tell you all, no, thank you. So that does eliminate one person from your discussion.
I would like to wait. This is Laura. And maybe stress in a follow-up email that we do need to select them at the next meeting. That way we could probably hopefully get more in attendance. But I think I would like to wait a little longer, but definitely vote next meeting for sure.
Okay,
Sorry, I have a lot of background noise.
it's fine. Christine?
Laura just communicated exactly what I was going to communicate. I think with the bylaws, we had plenty of time to look at the information and to evaluate, and I felt confident in moving ahead with the vote. But at this moment, knowing that we're missing some community members, I just don't feel as comfortable moving ahead and thinking about chair or vice chair.
Can we put it in the email that if someone feels like they would like to put their name in as a candidate for nomination for the chair or vice chair, that could be expressed through email and brought for next month's meeting then?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good suggestion, Jerry. Will, do you have your
Yeah,
hand?
I'm fine with waiting too. I think we may be in the same situation a month from now. This is summer and people are taking vacations. So I do like the idea of maybe we can start to, like, I don't know how much of this we can offline versus like, you know, I'm sure the actual vote needs to take place during a meeting, but at least trying to, whoever's interested, send your name and like a couple sentences about why you're interested. We share that around, and then that way, if we do have fewer people, like if we're in the same situation where we've got 4 people missing next month too, then at least to Jerry's point, we've had the time to review everyone who was interested.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Is there anyone tonight who's interested? I can put it in the email and then I can ask for people to throw their name in the hat. And then we can sort of do it that way. Do you want to do it like that, or do you all want to just add your name to the email? Well, go ahead.
My plan for tonight was if no one else wanted to do it, I was going to volunteer to do it. I wanted to give some space if anyone else wanted to step up, but I'm willing to do it if we don't find other people who are interested. And either chair or vice chair is fine.
Okay. That's how I became the PTO secretary. No one stepped up. Okay, that's helpful. Yeah, I did mention it to people as they told me they weren't going to be here, and said like we are going to select. So if you would like to, and no one responded except Misty, who said I really can't. So I will send that in an email. Lori?
I really like the idea of just saying a couple sentences about who you are and do pretty much anything. But I mean, like, I knew Will in a previous life, but I don't know what he's doing now, actually. So I'd love to know just a little bit about the people who are willing to step up. Not me, but I don't know if ex officio members can be vice chair or chair. But
There's nothing in the bylaws that says that ex officios or alternates can't. So I think that all members are welcome to.
okay, but I am not volunteering.
Okay.
I don't have time, but
Okay. Well, I will put together an email as a follow-up and ask members to send out if they're interested in which role they're interested in and a short summary of why they're interested and what they would bring to the role. And then we can kind of go from there and plan to do this in August. How does that sound? Christine?
I was just going to ask for a point of clarification. Did you communicate that Misty is going forward with the committee, just not wanting to sit in chair or vice chair?
Yes.
Or, okay, thank you.
Yeah, she had to work tonight. She will be back. She just cannot take the role of a vice chair, and she just clearly communicated that boundary in case someone nominated her.
Great, thank you for that.
She did not want to be elected while she wasn't here. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. That's really helpful. I'll follow up with people probably later this week. And then we can plan for that in our August meeting. Okay. So we're going to move on and we're going to spend the remainder of our meeting talking about the affordable housing draft policies. And we're kicking off your review, which is so exciting. I've been working on these policies since January, so it really feels like a long time coming for me. I'm really excited and I'm so appreciative of your time and your review. So thank you. So as I outlined in your first 6-month timeline in June, the policies are an important step to beginning the implementation of the trust funds work. You know, we can't start grant making or loaning until we have policies in place. And it answers a lot of the questions that the community has around how the trust fund will be administered. And they're really important. But I want to emphasize that I'm not here to rush your process. And I really value your perspective, and I want to honor the work that you need to take and the time that you want to take on this process. So we'll start with a discussion tonight, and I'm going to check in on how you're feeling about the process and where the policies are in the adoption stage when we wrap up tonight. I know in the timeline I showed you, it looked like I was hoping we might be close to adoption by August. And I said that that was kind of a wishful thinking stage so that we could move forward with an innovation round of funding in August or September. And really we're going to check in on how you're feeling about the policies and if they feel ready for you. And we'll just reevaluate. So I wanted to just give a quick overview. I know I shared this out, but we have undertaken quite an extensive process of stakeholder engagement around the draft policies. And I just wanted to kind of highlight who's reviewed them at these stages. And, you know, I finished writing them in April, and then we started community engagement in April. So that included internal review. You can see internal to our department, the city clerk's office, finance. And then when you all feel ready, then the city attorney's office will review them. We also had community groups review them in May, including the Housing Coalition groups, housing service providers, developers, community development, financial institutions. The Housing Authority reviewed them as well. Jim, is that right, Lori? Yep. And then community members were invited to participate through Engage Missoula, interested residents and residents with experiencing accessing housing assistance. And then you all have been invited to review them this month. And you know, we've gotten tons of really useful feedback. You saw in the larger policy review document that had over probably 200 comments in that. That, you know, we've incorporated a ton of that feedback, and some of it we might incorporate at later stages, and some we just at this time are not incorporating but have rationale behind. And then, you know, as we've told the community in a really transparent way that we can't incorporate all of their feedback, but it will all be reviewed and communicated with you so that you have a chance to review it and discuss it. So I'm not going through all of the feedback because I've shared it with you, but I just wanted to highlight, and I know that there are community members watching as well, that there are, we've broken it down to what we've incorporated, and that's included here. Recommendations that we are not incorporating at this time and our rationales for that. And I'm not going through each one because I want to give you time for discussion, but this was all included in the packet. And then I'm highlighting the recommendations that we will have for discussion tonight. And those are really settled around this. This is just a coincidence that they're all from Paul, who's a committee member and who's also on vacation this week. But Paul reviewed the document at 2 intervals. He reviewed it early on as a community development financial institution member in his role at Clearwater, and then he reviewed it when I sent it out to the committee, and he had 2 stages of feedback. And I pulled out his recommendations for discussion at both stages. And so we'll have discussion around these tonight. And I pulled out the AMI discussion and the area median income discussion, especially because of your discussion in June around equity and the income discussion that you all began to have. So I wanted to pull that in. I shared his memo with you this morning. And then I also pulled in his comment about the small repair loans. I'm going to come back to these. I'm just going through a high level right now. And then also his comment about the annual allocation or annual application, which I'm going to provide some comment I have an idea about and then ask you your perspective on. And then I also got some comments from Will tonight that I can't incorporate right now. I didn't have time. But they seem really reasonable. So I'm going to just incorporate them. And I'll share them back to the group later at a later stage. But I didn't have time to do them before the meeting. So this is just a high level of Paul's memo that in case it helps with your discussion. But I wanted to just start with a question about just for you all about what are your high level impressions of the policies, and what is the best way for you to have this discussion and where do you want to start? So I saw Will's hand and then we'll go to Heidi.
Thank you. On the income limits, I do think that's in line with what we discussed last time. The only thing I'd say, I think another key thing we discussed was, we really want to be prioritizing where the need is greatest. And so I wonder if there's some way to think about this recommendation where it's like, these are how we'll change the income limits. But like the priority, like if there's some perspective, like, priority should be focused on those who are most in need or something like that. And like, maybe that breaks down. I don't even know if you need to be that prescriptive about it, more so just a statement, like a guiding principle is these are the maximum limits, but obviously we want to focus need where it can have the, where those who might need it the most could benefit.
So Emily, I just have a process question on, I guess if we were to increase what rental income limits are able to be funded by the Housing Trust Fund, since those are defined in the housing policy, would that take the form of like a recommendation from this body to council to change the housing policy? Like, I'm just curious what this process would look like.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't necessarily know that answer. Montana's here, so I'm going to ask her to jump in too. And I also just want to name one thing also, is that, just a reality in our current state of where we are in the trust fund is that we won't be making full project awards in the trust fund for a while, if not maybe ever. And that it is very likely that the trust fund will complement other funding sources. And so it's something just to think about too, in that that we may need our AMI or area median income alignment to match things like HUD alignment so that projects are still eligible for CDBG and home community development block grant and home dollars, or for low income housing tax credit project dollars, or, you know, just thinking about the overall consequences of if our trust fund projects are not in full alignment with other available funding sources, what are the consequences of that? So it's just something I wanted to name. And what I thought was really interesting in Paul's analysis is that I appreciated his analysis a lot because it highlighted that the levels are currently in alignment, though maybe at the low end. The AMI levels do match what households could afford. And so it's something, you know, what I appreciated about his recommendation was that it's something that is like updated and monitored annually. So I have a curiosity about whether that actually could fit in the allocation plan rather than be something that you change in the draft policies or in the policies. So I wanted to name that, and then Montana, I'm sorry I asked you to come on and then I kept talking, but
that's okay. Yeah, I think we'll have to look into what a change like this might look like in terms of the housing policy. I think we also acknowledge in the policy the need to regularly look at data and update and reassess and make sure that the implementation of the policy is in line with the current needs in the community. So it may be useful for you and I, Emily, to go back to the policy, look at the places where we do really clearly define. I know the incentives program is one where we do pretty clearly define area median income levels. And that will likely change as we take on the feasibility analysis for that program too. So we can look into the process components. But I agree that I think Paul's second recommendation that came with the memo is different than what we have on the screen here, which was his kind of first take at it.
Will and then Christine.
Thanks. I was just going to second, I think Heidi asked the right question, like how does this connect with what city policy is? It's been a while since I've been in the like HUD game, but my understanding in terms of how this could relate to other funding sources is at the end of the day, it's the most restrictive income requirement wins. So if I apply for low income housing tax credit, they say it's got to be 60% median income. If I want low income housing tax credits to fund the same development that's getting housing trust fund, I'm going to have to do 60%. I think what's interesting though is because there's the match requirement then is like ultimately then you're going to probably be a more competitive applicant when you can get that match from other resources. And then because of that, like de facto, you're going to end up having to lower your income limits anyway. So I think that's just like an interesting take is even if we set the income limits higher, it's not so much that we couldn't fund those. It's if they're going to use other funding, it may end up being a wash because they're going to have to do the more restrictive limits of whatever agency's funding them to.
Christine.
I just wanted to add that receiving this information today as a person who like works from 9 to 5 and then hustles to get dinner and tries to get back for this meeting, I don't feel like I had enough time to really evaluate what Paul was putting forth in his second evaluation. And also just acknowledge, and I'm not sure if anyone else on tonight's call or meeting feels this way, But while I feel like an informed citizen and someone who is engaged in this process, there's areas that are a steep learning curve for me, and still wrapping my mind around area and median income and these minutia changes that could have high level impact. I just would value a little bit more time, and I don't know what that looks like and if that's available, but I just want to communicate that out loud.
Thank you. Yeah, I apologize for that. I got back from vacation and I'm scrambling too. But yeah, thank you. And I will also offer to anyone in the future, if there are times that you want to just jump on and do some deep digging, that's totally available too. Lori?
I just want to second what Christine and Will just said. I love the idea of having more flexibility in terms of the income limits, especially if we're looking at individuals being able to apply for the trust fund and for whatever use that they may have and that's allowable. I think Paul's absolutely right that there is this mid-range where no other help is available for people who are just a little bit over the income limits. But Will is absolutely right that any other money that's coming into any of these projects is going to probably dictate what the income limits are. So with this housing trust fund policy allowing a little more flexibility, it does open up the possibilities for people who might be outside those limits but still can't afford to, whatever it is their project is. So I'm not opposed to having that be 120%. The NSP grants, ones that we used at Silvertip Apartments, they allowed, their income limit was 120%, a certain percentage. So that was immensely helpful for that project in getting it leased up, because we needed people with higher incomes to come in and live there. So I like that idea. I do agree with Christine that I didn't really get a chance to absorb all of the things that we saw. So I don't mind giving, taking a little more time there either.
Heidi?
So I'll just comment on the idea instead of the process. I actually think that leaving these income limits broader is a really good idea, just because I think it would allow us to fill in some of that missing middle housing that isn't occurring naturally on the market, but also isn't eligible for HUD funding. And with the limits that we currently have in the in the housing policy, I believe it's 80% AMI for rental and 120% AMI for homeownership projects. And those limits already exceed HUD limits. I believe it's 60 for rental and 80 for homeownership. And so we're already closing that gap a little bit with our housing policy. And I think that's super important. And when I was reading the draft admin manual, I actually had misremembered our housing policy because I already thought it was at 100% area median income, and I had to reread it, and it's not. So I think it's a really important conversation to have, and then of course we'd have to actually change the housing policy too. But yeah, I think the exciting thing about the Housing Trust Fund is that it is so much more broad, because I think a lot more people can participate. So.
Well,
I just wanted to clarify what Paul's recommendation was, because I think I'm trying to look at a couple different docs right now. But was it to move rental to 100 and keep homeownership at 120, or was it to move everything to 120, rental and homeownership?
yeah, his original suggestion is to move rentals to 120.
Okay.
From 80 to 120.
Cool.
And
I'll
then
just
if
add.
he did an evaluation of it, his memo sort of says maybe not is kind of what I read from his memo. But it sounds like there could still be merit to it, or to some expansion or broadening.
And I'll just add that I agree if we want to like give people more time to digest this, that's fine with me.
Yeah, there's not a request to make any decisions tonight. It's just the start of the discussion. And there's definitely, an open invitation to do work between meetings and between the meetings. So if there's especially places in the policy that you would like to dig into, or you have like more curiosity about and you would like to chat about it, call me, or we could have coffee or jump on Zoom or whatever. I'm happy to dig in with you. Will, or Christine, and then Will.
I was just going to add, and I don't want to operate with assumption, but it does feel like we're jumping into this space, and I want to acknowledge what Heidi presented, that the missing middle in Missoula is also appearing to grow larger post-COVID. And it's easy to come into this meeting and want to hang on to what we thought we knew. And I want to be very mindful of providing need where need is greatest, and there's a scope that's changed, and I do want us to just be mindful and continue to think about that missing middle piece that seems to be presenting itself post-COVID.
Emily, I liked your idea of, and I don't know what exactly the procedure needs to look like here, based on our bylaws, even though we just adopted them. But the one thing I think about is if we move this to the August meeting, it's like, I feel like we could be back where we started, where we're like trying to make sure we're all informed. And I wonder if it would make sense for like, and I don't know what the right procedure is for this, but whoever's interested in kind of like taking this as a subtask, and maybe we put like one final call out for what feedback do people have on the admin policies. And then it's like, we meet sometime in the interim between. Is that allowed? Like, can we work that out as like a small subcommittee and then report back out to the larger committee at the August meeting?
Yeah, I think that's allowed. I should know this in your bylaws, but I think that is allowed. I would say, I think what would be really helpful at this point is like a proposal of like, what is the proposed change? And that's, what we asked other reviewers and was really useful was what's the proposed change and what we could work from. So I would, and that's really what Paul proposed too. So is it a variation on that or what? So I think that could be something that you all could build from. And I think what we need to do for August meeting is, or what I would recommend doing for August meeting is bringing something concrete for you all to react to. And is that where you want to move toward, so I think that's what I would propose or recommend. I think it will be really valuable to have more members of the committee have discussion around it and informed by this discussion as well. But I think that we could get there. But taking some notes, I could start a proposal of something, but I think what I think I'm hearing is that it's probably an extension of the rental housing program up to 120% area median income, and then a discussion about what might be some of the consequences of that, maybe in the August meeting. including, and we may do some work on what are the process pieces of that between the next meeting, and kind of move from there. Is that what I'm hearing? Does that sound right to you all? Heidi, do you have something? You're on mute.
I hit the wrong button. I guess personally, I would be comfortable with just going to 100 instead of going to 120 on both. I do think. Sorry, my family's really loud. Okay, thank you. I asked them to leave. I think there is a kind of a process question still for me, because this is so tied to the housing policy, and then they would be out of line. And so I think that maybe I don't know if we could just make our document automatically adjust when the housing policy changes, and then our body's recommendation could just be to council to change the policy. But I don't know if that seems cleaner to me, because so we can just change one thing and have it stay consistent across documents. But I would defer to Montana and you on what works best for internally and for staff, and just keeping it as clean as possible.
Emily, I think we can pretty quickly, towards the end of this week, just double check on process in terms of housing policy, and as components of the implementation shift as programs are created, and get back to the group pretty quickly.
Great, thank you. Does a proposal of going up to 100% AMI for rentals sound, how does that sound to the group? Will?
I'm fine with that. I do like Heidi's idea, though, that I feel like there should be one point of reference at all time, that if anyone wants to know what are the income limits that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund supports, and that's codified in the housing policy. I like the idea of, okay, like if we feel strongly it should go up to 100% for rental, then to make the recommendation to council to amend it. Because I do worry about the ambiguity that could result if there's two different documents that say two different things. And I say that like regardless of whether, like if we could do our own thing, like I just think it makes more sense. We should just have one vision for what the income limits should look like.
Okay, I think we'll do some follow-up on that, on what that process piece looks like. Okay, well, we will do some internal work on that for the August meeting. And is the group comfortable with moving on to some of the other discussion points? Okay, great, thank you. The small repair loans piece that Paul raised, I wanted to provide some clarification on. So the intent of the housing policy, the draft policies, is really to outline everything that can be funded under the housing policy. And we include all allowable activities. And I wanted to raise that Paul's comment might actually be a better space for something like the allocation plan, for you all to identify that something like a small repair loan program or project may not be a priority for you in a specific year, but that we would still keep the activity and the program included in the umbrella of the housing policy, because it is included in the ordinance and it's included in the housing policy and it links into it. So I just wanted to outline that. I've already told Paul that, but I just wanted to flag that for you all, that there's some of that kind of overlapping value piece there. And so I already told Paul, but I just wanted to pull it in for you all as well. And that's really like, and I think it's really important to start to pull out like how the allocation plan is different than this document, and where you'll start to make priorities each year. And that even though every activity is listed in the policy, doesn't mean that that's what will be prioritized and ultimately funded. And that will be the work that you'll do to kind of set those priorities. So, and then the final point of discussion that also Paul pulled out really was a coincidence, was the strengthening of the commitment. He recommended that we strengthen the commitment to allow the applications, to allow applications throughout the year. And so this really goes back to like having an annual allocation cycle. And I wanted to raise this. So there are a couple things at play here. So we will run a unified application round, which we write about in the policies. And then we also have the minimum trust fund balance, which will serve as the mechanism to award things throughout the year as they come up, emergencies or innovative programs or projects throughout the year. And that will really be our opportunity to do projects throughout the year that I think Paul is highlighting here. So we discussed internally that there might be an opportunity to reword that language and kind of emphasize that that's where people will come for mid-year applications rather than minimum trust fund balance. Maybe there's some rewording to do there, but I haven't done that until I talked with you all and then gave you an opportunity for discussion. And wanted to ask whether the minimum trust fund balance, which we currently have at $150,000, is an arbitrary number that I picked based on our current budget and current revenue. And I wanted to propose an alternative, which is that the trust fund balance that is held could be something that you all determine in the annual allocation plan based on the revenue of the upcoming budget year. So it could be something that changes based on what we're anticipating in our revenue and budget. So I just wanted to pose that, and could be something that changes each year depending on what we have available to make projects in grants and loans in the community. Was that an okay summary, Montana?
Yeah.
Okay. What do you think about that? Will?
I think it makes perfect sense. Is your thought, Emily, that like, is it to kind of control for both upward and downward direction in the overall like budget line item for the housing trust fund? Like, what if one year we could only fund? Can you remind me what is it right now? Is it 1 million?
The budget right now is 750,000.
750. So it's like that's 150 out of 750. If we doubled that one year or halved it one year, like that 150 ends up being a different percentage. So I do like the flexibility of that. I think it'd be interesting to kind of keep tabs on what requests we get for that off-cycle funding, because like, is 150 even enough to get the job done, or is it too much and we actually don't need that much around? So I do like building in what you said, some amount of flexibility into the policies, and then that gets like minted in the annual allocation plan each year.
John?
Well, I was just going to suggest that I think you give yourselves as much flexibility as you possibly can. I mean, apart from contingencies and emergencies, there's no reason to hold back resources here unless we've got multi-year projects, et cetera. This money isn't earning interest. So it's made for spending, right? So I'd certainly give yourselves as much latitude as possible to spend it to absolutely nothing if you've got a project that requires you to do that.
Thank you. I think Paul's point, we've talked about this a little bit. I don't want to speak for Paul, but I feel like we've talked about it enough that I can represent him in this, is that a concern is that there will be projects that come in September that would be really viable to be funded by the trust fund, but for this funding won't be able to get off the ground. And if there isn't any minimum trust fund balance left, and we're not granting again until January or February, that we'll miss that opportunity to invest in an affordable project. And so I think that that's why he's recommending that there's more of a annual cycle, or like just a consistent cycle. And what we're trying to balance is that there's a capacity issue there, that like currently I am one staff member and I can't constantly be running grant rounds. And so we need to find a balance there, and this minimum trust fund balance or reserve balance allows us to do both and be responsive to innovative community needs and emergency needs, as well as hold a fairness of a unified application round that also allows us to leverage our HUD funds as well and other local funds. Montana?
Yeah, I just wanted to offer that I think Will's observation is right, that it'll take a few rounds to kind of understand like what do the applications look like and on the ongoing basis versus what are we seeing in that annual kind of January time period, and that data as we collect it and as we get a sense will really help. I think help you all adjust and make a decision. So the idea of putting what that minimum balance is in that annual allocation plan offers you a lot of flexibility to test things out and see what works and adapt year over year. And I also think that, and Heidi and Lori, you can speak to this better than I can, but I think for really big construction projects, the difference of like 4 or 5 months in terms of funding application, at least for projects that use things like HUD funds and low-income housing tax credit, doesn't necessarily matter as much because there's such a long time span anyway, and they're kind of syncing up lots of different application cycles. So the real power, I think, of this ongoing level of funding is for smaller things that pop up that are really time sensitive. But that's something that you all can test as you see how things shape up over the first few years.
Well,
yeah, Emily, my first reaction when I saw this too was exactly what you said about the administrative burden of having to constantly manage grant rounds. So I'm glad you brought that up because I actually meant to bring that up. So does it sound like do we want to is the idea we want to insert, it's like we kind of want to address Paul's question, but I'm also compelled by what John said, that it's like we also don't want to be sitting on $150,000 and never get spent when the need is so high. And so I just wonder if the admin policy should say like the goal is to have this balance, but subject to the annual allocation plan, the oversight committee can approve deviations from that policy. Because yeah, what if we had an amazing project come through in the regular cycle that needed another 150 grand to be viable? Like we would hate to do that. We also hate to just be sitting on money for 12 months.
Yeah, I think there's, I don't know. And I think that's the cool part about it, right? Like to what Montana said, and I think, Will, you said it earlier, like, I think there is a lot of learning in these first few years about what projects are going to look like and about what projects will need. And Will, I like the desire for that flexibility and that we want to make sure that money gets spent. So part of why I said I don't know is there was a vacuum behind me and I couldn't hear all of what you said. So I'll have to listen to the recording. Because I know there was something really important in there that as I rewrite this section and bring it back to you all in August. But I think this could really be built out in a more specific way. Heidi, I saw your hand, and then Christine, and then we'll wrap up, I think, for tonight.
Thanks. So I guess I have a question of how we're tracking our funding goal for being fully allocated in the Housing Trust Fund. I think our goal is 10 million, if I remember correctly. And I guess in my head, I almost thought that there might be two phases of what this Housing Trust Fund does and how it operates. One is we're building toward that goal of being fully allocated, and then how it would function when it is fully allocated. But I am not a finance person, so like what the nuance there is somewhat lost on me. But at the same time, I think the strategies maybe are different, and I think that would be worth exploring. But someone with more like money finance skills than me probably would have to explain it to me. But yeah, I guess I'm nervous about spending down everything every year because I don't know how we're tracking growth then if we're always going back to zero, if that makes sense. So.
Christine?
I'm not sure I have input in this moment just based on what Heidi just said and considering the idea of maintaining a balance or having flexibility, but maybe a point of clarification for me that I believe I read and I was searching through documents. Do we evaluate this policy yearly? Is there an intense need to be finite in this moment? For some reason, I thought we evaluated this yearly, and this could potentially be an opportunity to put our best foot forward based on the information that we have at hand and the input that's been given, and then evaluate the process again. But I could be remembering incorrectly. So
Yeah, you're remembering that correctly. So in the bylaws, we added a sentence that you would just review them for necessary updates. And so not expectation that we'll fully rewrite them, but that if there are changes that are needed, we would do an annual update on them. Yeah.
But having that statement does allow some of that flexibility to reevaluate the specific piece that could also be impacted by how we choose or choose not to operate each year, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And I have an expectation that as we run things like grant making rounds and learn things, that there will be requests for amendments as well.
Yeah.
As we just learn new things about how the policies are actually implementing.
Okay, thank you.
This is a really great discussion. I have lots of notes. I will have to review the tape. Or it's not a tape, but you know what I mean? So that I can capture all of this for next month. So I would just like to ask, I'm going to capture these, I think really what I'm capturing for the income limit is a proposal around moving up to 100% AMI with a more clearly defined process of what that would look like in partnership with the housing policy. And then also some structured maybe discussion about what those consequences or like that might look like. And then also a rewritten section on the minimum trust fund balance or the reserve balance and how that might operate. And I'll bring that back to you all for discussion in August. And then I also just want to ask if there's anything, I know, Will, you have some edits, and then if anyone else has additional edits, you can send them to me. But I do need them really kind of soon, just because I really need to wrap this part up, if that's okay. So if you could send them to me maybe by next Friday, that would be really helpful. And I do need you to please use the Excel document. I can't use track changes at this point. That would be really helpful. But I guess my last question as we wrap up is just, how are you feeling about moving forward in August? Are you ready to start having an adoption conversation? Or do you feel like that feels premature? I know, I recognize that not everyone is here, so that may not feel like a good question. Will?
I personally feel good about August, particularly if we can share out this stuff in the interim. I don't know what else will need to be on the agenda for August, but maybe just given that there'll be people who didn't get to get engaged in the conversation today, just try to limit the agenda. That this may be like, I know there might be other things, but this should probably be like the meat of the agenda.
Great. Okay, yeah, I was planning to be, and then I'll also be bringing you a proposed vision for the innovation round as well. That's kind of the bulk plan for August's meeting, and then our vice chairs and that as well. Okay, well, we are almost at time, but I just want to offer if anyone wants to check out with what went well today or what could go differently for next time.
Just a point of order, Emily, do we still need to approve the minutes?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
So someone want to move to approve?
I'll move that
June's
we
meeting?
approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. We'll do this by voice. All in favor of approving your minutes
Aye.
from June?
Aye.
I
Any opposed? Okay, great. Thank you. And then I'll just offer you, I know it's 8 o'clock, but just offer you if you have any points of anything that went well or anything that could go differently or better for next time, you can always email them to me or call me too.
I don't want to take up too much time, but I just want to thank you, Emily. This is a lot of work to try to corral all this, and I know how hard you've been working on it. And just thank you for what you're doing. And I'm sure we all feel the same way. We appreciate all the work you put into organizing this.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. You got me one more month. I got a I'm your facilitator one more month. All right. John, did you have something?
I move we adjourn.
Great. Have a great night. Take care.